What if I told you the price of bread sparked a revolution so wild they overthrew kings, rewrote time, and still ended up ruled by a short bloke with a superiority complex? Let's talk history watching completely unrelated footage just because I don't know how to edit a video. But don't worry, I promise you will understand history like never before, and even like it, probably. Right. Imagine this. One day, you're queuing for bread that costs more than your rent, your taxes are through the roof, the king's polishing his golden cutlery, and someone suggests maybe we just burn it all down. And instead of laughing, everyone says yes. Welcome to France, 1789, where being born into the wrong class wasn't just bad luck, it was a death sentence. And where cancel culture wasn't a tweet, it was a guillotine. This isn't some dusty tale about powdered wigs and fancy court dancing. This is about rage turned into revolution. A full-blown, blood-soaked reset button. Politics got reinvented, monarchs got decapitated, and Europe had a proper existential meltdown. And here's the real kicker. We're still living in its political aftershock. You think left versus right started on Twitter? Nah, that came from where people sat in the French National Assembly. No joke. So, why should you care about a 230-year-old uprising involving cake, blood, and trousers? Because the French Revolution wasn't just about taking down a king. It was about taking down a system. And that system? Parts of it are still twitching. Imagine you're dropped into 1780s France. Spoiler, it's not exactly a five-star experience. Inflation's skyrocketing, debts are multiplying faster than gossip, and King Louis XVI, let's just say he's more collect all the clocks than make decisions now. Wealthy nobles are swanning about in Versailles, sipping wine, while common folk are rationing stale bread and praying their rent collector doesn't show up with a grin. Now picture this, a social hierarchy so lopsided, it's like the world's worst game of Jenga. At the bottom, you've got the third estate, merchants, farmers, bakers, a terribly underestimated army of everyday people who get taxed so hard, they're sending the treasury letters begging, for crying out loud, give us a break. And what do they get? More taxes, more decrees, more being told to mind their place. Cue the Estates General in 1789. Think of it as a party that only the rich are invited to. The third estate turns up in their boots, expecting to have a voice. Instead, they're told to sit next to the privileged, predictably bored, and utterly tone-deaf. So they do what any self-respecting group ignored by the aristocracy would do. They break ranks and declare themselves the National Assembly. Enter the tennis court oath on June 20th, 1789. Locked out of their own hall, they storm a tennis court, yes, one with nets and everything, and vow not to leave until there's a constitution. Cue dramatic music. It's like an angsty rom-com, but instead of pining glances, there's philosophical fury and an oath to rewrite generations of power imbalance. Meanwhile, back in Versailles land, King Louis XVI is having a meltdown, half because his finances are exploding, half because his wife, the scapegoated showgirl, yes, Marie Antoinette, is getting roasted in the political press so badly that even the tabloids would blush. Yet she probably didn't even like cake. That line was propaganda-level marketing at its finest. Now we pull out the labels, France's version of tabloid porn, minus the subtlety. Pamphlets depicting royals in absurd, scandalous situations were spreading like wildfire. Think Game of Thrones meets Bachelor in Paradise, except with satire so sharp it could slice through gilded wigs. These were the fake news of their time. But oh, the outrage they ignited. And just when you think things are absurd, the financial crisis peaks. The government's in an existential crisis. Nobles won't budge, peasants are starving, and politicians can't stand another tax symposium. So what does everyone do? They wander down to the Bastille like it's a tourist attraction that needs smashing. On July 14th, 1789, they storm it, not to free a massive prisoner count, there were only 7 confused souls inside, but to liberate ammunition and, frankly, a whole lot of symbolism. Now let me paint the players. King Louis XVI, or the indecisive doughboy, is a good-hearted chap who maybe should have been a clockmaker, not a king. Marie Antoinette, the showgirl scapegoat, gets all the blame with none of the facts. Classic scape VIP. Robespierre, the guillotine whisperer of virtue, stands up for truth, then becomes the man handing out executions like party favors. Danton, a loud revolutionary with a conscience, is full of charisma with just enough moral backbone to get him chopped. The sans-culottes, your pantsless rebels, kick aristocratic fashion to the curb and redefine style as power, literally long trousers for liberté. Olympe de Gouges, the feminist who dared, pens the Declaration of the Rights of Woman and pays the ultimate price for being too progressive, too soon. By August 89, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen drops. Imagine a playlist of all your favorite Enlightenment philosophies. Liberty, property, security, resistance to oppression, spun so loudly it drowned out royal privilege. But you know revolutions rarely stop at declarations. Cue the trophy tour of tensions. By 1791, the monarchy turns into a constitutional figurehead on life support. By 1793, the king and his queen are guillotined, and the revolution goes full reign of terror. Around 17,000 heads later, the very ideals of reason started off with, questionable methods. And that, my dear viewer, is exactly what happens when you mix bread shortages, elite intransigence, scandal-sauntering pamphlets, and systemic inequality. All it takes is a spark and suddenly the whole house is aflame. But hang on, this is no museum exhibit. It matters because we're still living in its aftermath. Left versus right come from how people sat in that assembly. Human rights, breathable remix of the 1789 original. Secular governments, born in the ashes of church control. And that, my friend, is where things started getting dangerous. All right, grab your emotional support croissant because things are about to escalate faster than a Twitter argument during an election year. We left off with the Third Estate storming out of the Estates General like underpaid extras in a period drama. They were done being the national doormat. What they wanted? A constitution. What they got? Locked out of the building. Real subtle, Louis. So what did they do? Found an empty tennis court, swore an oath, and basically said, "We're not leaving until France gets a reboot." That's the tennis court oath. No rackets, just radical intent. Imagine a group of MPs breaking into Wimbledon during a constitutional crisis and vowing not to leave until Parliament grows a conscience. That's the vibe. Meanwhile, Paris is boiling. Literally. It's a summer of economic collapse, bread riots, conspiracy theories, and zero chill. There's talk the king is sending troops to crush the movement. And remember, when a monarch moves troops, it's rarely for hugs and cupcakes. July 14th, 1789. The people don't wait to be trampled. They head to the Bastille, a medieval fortress/prison that had become the architectural equivalent of oppression written in stone. Now, was it full of political prisoners? Not really. There were 7, including a guy who thought he was Julius Caesar. But it wasn't about numbers, it was about symbolism. And the symbol fell. Heads were paraded on pikes. Parisians, it turns out, were very into DIY justice. And now, with the monarchy rattled and the crowd buzzing, the revolution really takes its protein shake. The National Assembly, the people's sort of parliament, begins drafting the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It's like the Enlightenment greatest hits album. Liberty, equality, resistance to oppression, all packed into one flaming political grenade. It was revolutionary, yes, but also terrifying if you happen to be rich, titled, or deeply fond of wigs. Now picture King Louis, floppy, indecisive, clock-fiddling Louis. He's standing in Versailles with his advisors, mumbling things like, "Maybe we should compromise?" Too late, mate. France was on fire, and you brought a water pistol. Let's fast forward. The royals try to escape, like dress up as servants and flee to Austria. It's basically the worst episode of Undercover Boss ever. They're caught, dragged back to Paris, and now, instead of a monarchy with flair, you've got a royal family that's more hostage than head of state. 1791 to 1792, France tries to be chill. Tries. A constitutional monarchy is formed. Spoiler, it lasts about as long as an ice cube in a kiln. The mood? Paranoia. Foreign powers, Prussia, Austria, are circling like buzzards. French revolutionaries are now convinced that if they don't purge the system will purge them. Cue the guillotine. Oh, yes, the national blade, the ultimate equalizer. Heads start to roll, starting with King Louis XVI himself in January 1793. He tried to appeal to reason. The crowd answered with steel. A few months later, Marie Antoinette follows. Was she a villain? A victim? The revolution didn't care. Nuance doesn't do well when you're feeding a mob. Now, with the monarchy 6 feet under, enter the reign of terror. It's not a metaphor, it's an official period. Revolutionary justice, turbocharged. Anyone remotely suspected of opposing the Republic, snitches, neighbors, ex-lovers, poets, met Madame Guillotine. If Twitter had existed, it would have been one giant "you're canceled" thread, followed by an execution. And who's running this fever dream of a state? Robespierre. Ah yes, the incorruptible, the man who once stood for virtue and rights, and then morphed into a micromanaging, paranoid execution overlord. Imagine if Captain America slowly turned into Darth Vader, but still thought he was the hero. That's Robespierre. He believed in virtue so deeply, he killed people for being insufficiently virtuous. His speeches, half inspiration, half threat. His vibe, stressful. If your neighbor sneezed weirdly during the national anthem, Robespierre might have had them removed from existence. Meanwhile, George Danton, our charming, rowdy revolutionary with a conscience, starts saying, maybe we've gone too far. Mistake. He gets chopped. Olympe de Gouges wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Woman, too outspoken. Chopped. Priests who didn't swear loyalty to the secular state, chopped. People who said, maybe stop chopping, you guessed it. Robespierre had become the very tyrant he once vowed to destroy, obsessed with purity, incapable of trust, addicted to fear as a political weapon. Then, July 1794, karma finally shows up. Robespierre makes one final speech, accuses half the government of being traitors, but refuses to say who. Bad move. He gets arrested, tries to shoot himself, fails, gets guillotined with his jaw hanging off. Brutal end to a man who believed the blade brought justice. And with that, the terror dies with him. People exhale. France is exhausted. Enlightenment ideals have been soaked in blood. No one's wearing red caps anymore. The revolution has cannibalized itself. But don't get too comfortable, because 1799 is just around the corner, and into this political burnout strolls a short Corsican man with excellent branding, Napoleon Bonaparte. Think, if Elon Musk had a military uniform and a continent-sized ambition complex, he stages a coup, installs himself as emperor, and, irony of ironies, ends the revolution. But here's the kicker. He uses the revolution's playbook. Meritocracy, law codes, nationalism. It's all still there, just under a different face. A lot more epaulettes, fewer committees. So what's the takeaway? Simple. Every time someone in power tried to course-correct the revolution, they overcorrected. The moderate revolutionaries wanted equality, then came the radicals. The radicals wanted purity, then came the terror. The terror failed, and a strong man replaced them all. Sound familiar? It should, because we're still dealing with it. Populist rage versus elite control. Mass movements eating their own. Justice becoming vengeance. Political systems bending until they break. You don't need powdered wigs and guillotines for a revolution, just inequality, disillusionment, and a spark. And France? France lit the match for modern politics and hasn't stopped burning since. So, the revolution's over. Well, kind of. The heads have stopped rolling for now. Robespierre's jaw is somewhere in the Seine, and Napoleon's strutting in like he's about to drop the hottest empire since Rome. But if you think this whole French bloodbath stayed neatly within French borders, bless your naive little heart. Because this wasn't just a French tantrum, it was the political Big Bang. And guess what? You're still living in the debris field. Politics, left, right, fight. Let's start with something ridiculously basic that you use every day and probably never questioned. Left-wing and right-wing politics. Where's that from? Twitter? The Cold War? Hogwarts? Nope, the French National Assembly, 1789. They literally sat the radicals on the left side of the room and the monarchists on the right. Voila, the spectrum was born. Today, those labels still run entire nations, fuel election dramas, and cause Christmas dinners to implode. All because a bunch of powdered blokes couldn't agree on how close to sit to the king's chair. Rights, but make them universal. You like freedom of speech? The right to vote? Due process? That's not just your constitution being cute. That's Enlightenment France whispering in your ear from 200+ years ago. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was the prototype for modern human rights, and it's got more remixes than Beyoncé. It inspired the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the American Civil Rights Movement, South Africa's post-apartheid reforms, even the Arab Spring's manifestos. People from Haiti to Vietnam looked at the French Revolution and thought, hang on, if they can topple a monarchy with pitchforks and poetry, maybe we can too. Spoiler, many of them tried. Some succeeded. Others got CIA'd. Death of feudalism. Long live capitalism? Before the revolution, French peasants couldn't sneeze without paying a tax to some duke who'd never seen dirt in his life. Feudalism was a pay-to-exist scheme, a class-based pyramid scheme where the only thing that trickled down was disdain. The revolution torched it. Gone were the noble privileges, the tax exemptions, the inherited titles. Land was redistributed, laws rewritten, and everyone, in theory, became citizens, not subjects. Of course, capitalism sauntered in right after, with a new flavor of inequality. Less velvet and titles, more factories and interest rates. So yes, they killed the old beast, but gave birth to a newer, leaner predator. Still, if you're not working a farm you don't own for a lord who thinks your daughter is part of the harvest, thank the revolution. Church versus State, the breakup album. Before the revolution, the Catholic Church in France was less a religion, more a property empire with candles. It owned about 10% of the land, didn't pay taxes, and got to decide who went to heaven or got burned for owning a weird-looking cat. Then the revolutionaries came in and went full, "It's not me, it's you," on the church. They nationalized church land, outlawed clerical privilege, and for a brief fever dream of a moment, even invented their own religion, the cult of the supreme being. Think, atheist Instagram influencer meets spiritual panic attack. More importantly, they planted the seed of secular governance, government not owned by a bishop or blessed by divine right. France pioneered it. Then Mexico, Turkey, and modern democracies across Europe followed. It's the reason your local mayor doesn't quote scripture to pass a parking law, hopefully. The global aftershock. And this bit's big. The French Revolution didn't just reshape France, it redrew the globe. It inspired the Haitian Revolution, the first successful slave revolt in history, Latin American independence movements from Venezuela to Argentina, Greek independence from the Ottomans. Even Bolsheviks in Russia quoted the revolution like it was gospel. It also terrified British elites, yes, us lot, who immediately cracked down on anything that smelled like rebellion. Think more censorship, more troops, fewer fun pamphlets. European monarchies, who suddenly realized their heads were in fact detachable. And let's not forget Napoleon, who turned revolutionary chaos into an exportable package. He carried those post-revolutionary laws, the Napoleonic Code, across Europe, laying the groundwork for modern legal systems from Belgium to Brazil. Oh, and the metric system. Yup, the revolution gave us the metric system. Why? Because they were so allergic to monarchy, they didn't just want to decapitate the king. They wanted to decapitate the calendar, the clock, and every inch, pound, and Sunday that smelt of the Ancien Regime. So they made 10-day weeks, which flopped harder than Cats the musical. Decimal time, 10 hours a day, 100 minutes an hour, your Fitbit would have had a meltdown. And of course, meters, liters, and grams, aka the world's revenge on Americans. Still bleeding from it. And here's the gut punch, mate. We're still arguing about what they started. Populist rage versus elite arrogance? See Brexit, Trump, Macron's pension riots, Chile's constitution rewrite, India's farmer protests, wealth inequality, then it was cake. Now it's Bezos's rocket. Democratic disillusionment, the French gave us a taste, and we've been gagging on the aftertaste ever since. And cancel culture? Mutt. Robespierre was canceling people before it was digital. Only instead of a subtweet, it was a blade. The French Revolution wasn't clean. It wasn't perfect. But it proved that people can rip down centuries of power if they're angry enough, even if they don't know what comes next. They cracked open the system. We're still trying to patch it. Oh, and if you think that's wild, wait till you hear what was happening behind the scenes. Labelays, sex scandals, calendar crimes, the weirdest PR campaign in history. All right, you've made it this far, through the blood, the rage, the powdered wigs, and the political chaos. So how about a little treat? A sweet, spicy, deeply unhinged peek behind the revolutionary curtain. Because while France was busy guillotining kings and reinventing democracy, they were also doing this nonsense. Marie Antoinette, the queen of fake news. Okay, let's talk libels. Basically the 1790s version of a drunk tweet storm, written with a quill, dipped in scandal. These weren't your average royal roasts. Oh no, we're talking full-blown pornographic fan fiction featuring Marie Antoinette, usually in, let's say, imaginative scenarios. One pamphlet had her getting frisky with a bishop, another with her own son. Another accused her of hosting orgies in the palace during a famine. Basically, if there was a depraved rumor to invent, someone printed it, passed it around the pub, and said, "Can you believe this tart?" None of it was true, but facts don't matter when the pitchforks are out. It was the first great fake news campaign, and it worked. Marie became the ultimate scapegoat, a pre-TikTok celebrity takedown, canceled before it was trendy, and executed with a new look that was very headless chic. Calendar from hell. The French tried to cancel time itself. You want chaos? Let's talk about the French Republican calendar, the revolution's bold attempt to delete God, tradition, and Sundays, all in one go. They decided the old calendar was too religious, too monarchist, too 12e, so they made a new one. Ready? 10-day weeks. Yes, they added 3 extra workdays like sadists. No Sundays. They literally banned the day of rest. Cue national grumpiness. Each day was named after plants, tools, or farm animals. Imagine penciling in a dentist appointment on Turnip Day. Even better, they renamed the months to stuff like Brumaire, fog, Frimaire, frost, and Thermidor, hot AF, which honestly sound more like hipster baby names than actual timekeeping. People were so confused, they missed holidays, messed up harvests, and thought Napoleon had been born in August. Spoiler, Napoleon scrapped it the moment he seized power. Because even he, an emperor who crowned himself, looked at that calendar and went, absolutely not. Cake? What cake? Right? Let's settle this once and for all. Marie Antoinette never said, let them eat cake. She didn't say it in French. She didn't say it in German. She didn't mutter it in a palace hallway while sprinkling diamonds on a croissant. The phrase existed before she was even born. It was likely made up, slapped onto her like a bad meme, and fed to the angry masses like, well, cake, because it sounded like something a clueless royal would say, didn't it? And that, dear viewer, is your early lesson in weaponized PR. A fictional quote destroyed a real woman, faster than you can say burn her Instagram. So yes, the French Revolution gave us universal rights, democracy, secularism, and modern politics, but it also gave us revenge porn pamphlets, a calendar that made farmers cry, and a pastry quote that ruined a queen. And that brings us to the real kicker. They weren't trying to be symbols. They were just people. Petty, messy, idealistic, terrified. And in trying to tear down one broken system, they accidentally invented our one. Let's tie it all together. The chaos, the courage, the consequence. They rewrote politics with pitchforks, guillotines, and passion. What have you done with your outrage lately? All right, time for the part where we put down the baguette and pick up the mirror. So here's the wide shot. In 1789, a bunch of starving Parisians, broke, ignored, and royally pissed off, didn't just change their government. They detonated the idea that power belonged to the few. They took centuries of divine right, aristocratic smugness, church-state entanglement, and chopped it off at the neck. That wasn't just France's problem. It was a global dress rehearsal. Every modern protest, every election, every politician using words like liberty and the people, they're borrowing lines from that script. Left wing versus right wing. That's literally just where the delegates sat in the French National Assembly. Democracy, secularism, human rights, imported straight from revolutionary Paris, like political wine and ideology cheese. But here's the thing no one likes to say out loud. They didn't fix everything. They replaced one nightmare with several others. Blood was spilled, power was abused, and the mob? Well, the mob doesn't always know what it's doing with the matches once the fire's started. Sound familiar yet? Because the same patterns are circling now. Elites still hoard, populists still roar, and the public still caught between burn it down and fix it from within. It's the same house, same blueprint, slightly fancier drapes. So, yeah, they rewrote politics with pitchforks, guillotines, and raw human fury. What have you done with your outrage lately? Because history doesn't repeat. It just changes costumes and walks back on stage. Sleep tight. Democracy's still bleeding. And the mob still remembers where the Bastille was.